It's nice to be here in Boston in person with all of you. And I'm happy to say we're fortunate to have here today my friend Bob Chapek, the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, one of the most beloved and admired companies in the world, home to a number of businesses, including parks and resorts, direct-to-consumer media networks, and ESPN. He's been in this position for almost 2 years, and I think it's very fair to say it's been quite an eventful 2 years. As they've tried to deal with COVID-19, the company's pivot to direct-to-consumer with Disney Plus and everything else that's happened. Before becoming CEO in 2020, he served as chairman of the Disney Parks, Experience and Products, where he oversaw the company's 6 parks and resorts in the US, Europe, and Asia. He oversaw the Disney Cruise Line, Disney's global consumer products business, and much more. During his tenure, Disney Parks saw the largest investment and expansion in its 60-year history, opening the around $6 billion, which is a lot of money to us, in Beantown, the opening of the Shanghai Disney Resort in mainland China. Think about that. As well as the most technologically advanced and immersive lands in Disney Parks history, Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland Resort, and Walt Disney World. So it's a very exciting time to be in the media and entertainment business, and we're looking forward to hearing his perspective. But I'd like to speak from a personal perspective. My respect for Bob only grew while working with him with the NFL negotiations on our recent NFL extension. Long-term contract negotiations can be very challenging and complicated. And the more people involved, the more difficult it becomes. And I've always wanted to have as few people in the room as possible, the principals making the decision. I believe that's the best way to get a deal done. I'm going to give Bob tremendous credit for the way he handled those negotiations. He's smart, articulate, understanding, and most importantly, he earned your trust through those negotiations. And one thing I've learned in business, that a lot of people have trouble doing the last 5% and closing. Bob knows how to close. And I'll just say personally, after that negotiation, I decided that I was investing more in Disney's stock, and I'm very happy I did it too. It's done well, and so it's my pleasure to welcome Bob and ask him to come join us on the stage, and I'll ask him a few questions, and then you folks will also do the same. Thank you. Is that okay to say that about the stocks? So Bob, you took this job at a remarkable time, as I said, right in the middle of the pandemic. Could you talk about how you managed through that as a new CEO, and from a business perspective, how you continue to connect with consumers?
Well, my timing was very interesting because I think I had the job a total of like 10 days before the world fell apart. I remember having a conversation with our lead independent director on the board a few weeks before I got the job, and she said, there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, and I said, deal me the cards and I'll play them. I had no idea what I was signing up for at that time. So the first major decision I made, we were actually on our way back from our annual shareholders meeting in Raleigh that year. They change locations every year, and realized what we were dealing with, so we agreed to meet in the office in one of our conference rooms early the next morning, where we proceeded to do the unthinkable, and that was to shut down essentially almost all of the Walt Disney Company. And being part of the parks business, there's always the risk of a hurricane, and sometimes you might have to close a park in Florida for a day or two, or move your cruise ships and take the guests off and take them to safe harbor and close your cruise business for a day or two. But nobody ever could have imagined closing roughly 80% of the Walt Disney Company for what at that point, if you were going to ask for an over and under, people probably would have said 6 weeks. Turned out to be, in some cases, well, we're still recovering in many ways 2 years later. So it was certainly a baptism by fire, if you will. But we have great people who are very resourceful and committed to doing the best thing, not only for our guests, because think about it, you have hundreds of thousands of guests now that you're responsible for because they're in your hotel. They all need to get home. They can't get flights home, so we work to get them flights home. But in the meantime, you've got to take care of them. But you're taking care of them in your hotels, which are not equipped necessarily to feed everybody for a week until you can get everyone home, because all your food is in the theme parks and all your people are in the hotel. And so the balance between supply and demand is a little off, plus are the food types that you might serve in a hotel versus a theme park. But our chefs, our hotel cast members figured it out, as they always do. And I always say that the Walt Disney Company cast members, that's what we call our employees, by the way, so I'll use the word cast members often. They're at their best when the situation's at its worst. And they were just spectacular. In terms of the consumer, you used the word trust a second ago on the podium. Trust is everything. Trust with business partners, but trust with the end consumer as well. And one of the things that you might remember is the term the NBA bubble. And the NBA bubble was something that we worked with another one of our media partners, the NBA, so that they could continue their season. But it was somewhat selfish on our part, because we figured if we could take a whole bunch of 25-year-old vibrant guys and protect them from the pandemic by putting them in this Disney bubble in Orlando and let them complete their season, that would be a pretty nice proof point for consumers who were then, whenever we could open, whether it was going to be 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years, pretty nice proof point that we can keep your family safe. And so it worked out for the NBA, worked out for us, and certainly as soon as we opened up the gates of our parks, we had ample demand, more than ample demand, because we had built that trust. I think continued to build the trust that the brand is worthy.
Everyone in this room, I think, has been struggling about bringing employees back, and how much is work at home, and what is the work environment, and how did you bring back workers in the pandemic, and when you reopened the parks, what was that like?
Well, we want to be responsible not only with our guests, but also our cast members. And we took every possible precaution to keep them as safe as possible. We unfortunately had to furlough over 100,000 cast members during the pandemic, and we kept their health care benefits. We kept them employed as long as we could, but at some point you sort of look at your cash balances, given that you have zero revenue coming in. Plus we had the something Disney doesn't ever have, debt, because of the Fox acquisition, and then we had to take on additional liquidity in order to sort of make it through the pandemic. But eventually we had to do layoffs, but we tried to keep everybody furloughed as long as possible, and we paid their share of the benefits as well as our share of the benefits during that time frame. So we weren't sure when we reopened, in some cases a year and a half later, how many of those folks were obligated, because of their necessity to go find other jobs. And most of them did find other jobs, fortunately for them in that time period. But we had people come back to the Walt Disney Company at a time where everyone's struggling to try to find help, try to find workers.
So a lot of people in this room are sports fans, in case you didn't know. And sports continues to be the crown jewel of live programming. What can you say about ESPN's place in the sports ecosystem, given that you currently have the broadcast array of sports rights, including deals with really all the major NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball,
Hockey.
and college football. How do you look at that today?
Well, ESPN is just another brand in our stable that we're extremely proud of. It's a leader both in the media field, but also with the consumers, our fans that love to watch sports. And so if you're going to be the worldwide leader, you have to have the rights. And so we hook up with fine people like yourself and try to secure those rights.
Thank you, $27 billion later. I know, to Disney, but to people from Beantown, it's a big deal.
Yes, that was exactly the number. You remembered.
Kind of.
Yeah. But, so we have a contract with our fans, and to fulfill that contract, we need to retain the rights. But at the same time, I think there's a bright future with sports, given that contract that we have, both with our partners and our fans. And we've got considerations in all of our deals, thank you, for the flexibility to go direct to consumer with those offerings at the right time in the right place. When the consumer tells us it's time, we'll be prepared to take a larger step towards that because that's where the world's going. At the same time, we value and like our linear businesses that we have, ESPN on cable, the mainstream cable offering. But we're not satisfied, though, to just sort of rest on our laurels. We've got grand plans for the future, some of them which you and I have talked about, in terms of sort of setting a new expectation and leading the consumer to the next horizon in entertainment.
So direct-to-consumer is a very important part of your future, people can assume.
It is. And we want to be on the front end of the wave. We never want to be caught kicking and screaming going into new technology. Walt Disney, from the very time that he created the company, was always on the forefront of technology, and it enables us to really have an indelible bond with our fans and our guests and our consumers. And I think the ESPN Plus experience is fantastic, but I think we're only scratching the surface in terms of what that could look like in the future, in terms of using some of the innovation that we've had recently and bringing it to that platform. Because if you think about it, the direct-to-consumer offering, it's almost limitless. You're not really stuck to a certain number of channels. Therefore, personalization is really important, and therefore making customized offerings to people that may be, fans of the Patriots or the Red Sox or the Celtics is really important. So how do you do that? Well, if you've got the technology to be able to deliver that type of offering, and you've got the creativity to make it actually work, then you've got a recipe for the future, and we want to lead the way there.
Well, you just touched on it, that sports have become increasingly interactive from a fan point of view due to technology and what's going on with gaming potential and different forms of interactivity. Could you speak about that and how you see that over time?
Well, first of all, having a plethora of a number of platforms so that you can do something special for somebody that wants something different. I'll just take the Monday Night Football broadcast. We're very, very proud of working with you and Peyton and Eli to come up with the...
How did you get Peyton to come? Because all the networks wanted to... What was the incentive? We've talked about how you reward athletes and artists and what have you, but Peyton, I know, turned down some amazing opportunities to both be a principal, have great responsibilities. You did something with that Monday night broadcast to get him to join Eli for it.
Well, but Peyton's a very talented guy, so is Eli, and they can pretty much do what they want. So it was a function of building trust over time. We started off with Peyton's Places on ESPN Plus, and built a relationship. Jimmy Pitaro, who heads up our ESPN business, is very good at that and making sure that we're addressing the needs of the talent, which we always have to do in our business to make sure it's something that they want. And what they wanted was some flexibility in terms of not necessarily having to be on air every week in a different city, but to be able to be home, and they deserve that after all the years on the road, and to do something with each other. And so you take, okay, I don't want to do it every week, but I want to do it at home, and I want to do it with my brother. And they came to us with this idea, and we said, that sounds great. And I think it's going to be the beginning of something very, very special in terms of, again, customized, personalized sports offerings for people, given the fact that our technology now enables us to have multiple ways to sort of program these things, as opposed to the spectacular Monday Night Football broadcast that we have, but that's a little bit more about mass consumption and play-by-play. So I think we're actually onto something now.
I must tell you, just from someone who would be critical if it weren't that way, the Monday night game under Bob's leadership has really improved a great deal. And think about this thing is the Manning brothers on ESPN2 or
ESPN2
has over 2 million viewers. So started out, I mean, it's just being creative and flexible. It shows you to attract that kind of incremental viewership. It's a great credit. And so you ran the parks before stepping into the CEO seat. How did you leverage nostalgia from loyal fans of Disney parks while incorporating a new IP and new experiences really to attract fans?
Well, our core fans love Disney. They love legacy Disney. They love Walt Disney. They love old Disney. But at the same time, we know part of our mission, as established by Walt himself, was that, he liked to say Disneyland will never be complete as long as there's magic left in the world. And so we take that calling seriously as well. So how do you go ahead and appeal with a nostalgic bent to what has been traditional and legacy, but at the same time with the plethora of intellectual property that we have, whether it's Marvel, whether it's Star Wars, or different properties within Disney? How do you go ahead and access that in the park and grow beyond that core base of legacy properties? And depending on where people sit on the legacy side, some people don't want anything ever to change in the parks. But for the last 60 years, they've been changing anyway and evolving and modernizing, because storytelling evolves with technology, and it's new tools to give some of those great experiences that we talked about with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, or the hotel that you and I discussed that's never be called a hotel, but it's nice shorthand for this group to talk about the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser multi-day experience. So we've got the opportunity, I think, to value tradition, just like you do in your organization. You value tradition, you use that as your foundation, but don't rest on your laurels and say, well, that's the way it was 60 years ago, that's the way it's got to be today, because what happens if you do that. You become extinct. So it's a very interesting balance that we have to play.
It's just, and I had an occasion to go with someone, and I thought, what a great business model they have. They can put a movie out, and then they build features around it, and then people come here. You're seeing it, and it brings it back. It never dies. It lives forever. I actually went on that ride. That was something else. And I didn't shut my eyes. I wanted to. But it's a credit to you. So Disney will soon celebrate its 100th anniversary in what perhaps is the most disruptive media environment anyone could imagine in a generation. What is the company's strategy to ensure that the next 100 years of the company is as successful as the first?
Well, that's a great question. Being in this role at the turn of the 100-year mark is a great honor and privilege for me. And I take very seriously that my mission is to enter the next 100 years stronger than we were the first 100 years. And to do that, again, I think we need to look at storytelling through the eyes of technology so that the technology itself is hidden, because people don't want to see the core technology beneath the experience. They just want to say, wow, how did Disney do that? That's what we're after. And I think the next horizon in that is the metaverse. Now, there's been a lot talked about recently about the metaverse and a lot written about it, and it's kind of amorphous. It's a little bit hard to understand because it's not yet been created. But I think when you're the Walt Disney Company, we have this unique ability to take the physical manifestations of people's lives and blend it with the digital existence that they have. And to do that in a unique way that when you have parks and a digital platform, like Disney Plus, no one else has that ability to do it. So we won't be taking generic intellectual property that may not have the resonance that our branded properties have. If you want to have lunch with the Disney princesses, you can do that in the future, where not necessarily is that something that we could have afforded our guests, that type of fantastical experience in the future. And that's really what the Disney Metaverse presents to us. If you think of it from a creative standpoint, as I like to tell our creative leads of the different studios, whether it's Marvel, Lucas, Disney, whatever it's going to be, I say you can now sort of paint a three-dimensional canvas. If your specialty is movies, you've now branched out in a Disney Plus world to creating series, like The Mandalorian, right? Or any of the fantastic Marvel experiences like WandaVision. I mean, WandaVision, think about it. If you're familiar with it, that wouldn't have happened in a world of movies and TV shows. It needed, more at-bats. We needed more at-bats to do that and to try something different. And it's just worked out in a spectacular way. So now take that very same person, like a Kevin Feige who runs Marvel Creative, and you say, okay, now you have another dimension. And that's to really blend this physical world with the digital world without constraints, without saying that, well, it's a book, so I'm in the world of publishing, or it's in the music world, so I'm the business of, the record business, or I'm only in the movie business, but really break down all borders and just entertain. What does that do? I think it's tremendously liberating for a creative mind to now go into that three-dimensional canvas and take the physical and the digital and bring it all together in one sort of cohesive, untethered way. And so I do think that that's the next generation, but we're excited. We hope to see you all at our parks for the 100th anniversary, because it's going to be something really spectacular. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary right now at Walt Disney World, which is special in its own right. But the 100th anniversary of our company is something that we're very, very proud of. And not a lot of businesses survive 100 years. And to be still as robust as we are, I think, is a testament to all the cast members that make those magical experiences for our guests every day.
Well, that's really good. And I want to ask you one more question before opening up to the audience. Those of us who are privileged to be involved with sports teams understand in this environment how great it is to be able to bring, people are looking for things to come together given what's happened over the last 2 years. And I think Disney represents so many things similar to what sports teams do. But the thing that's fascinated me is, given the world we're living in and our relationship with China, and as complicated it is today, how you come and commit that kind of capital. And if you could just talk about what's going on there in China with your partnership.
Well, that was a long 16-year journey started by my predecessor, Bob Iger, who did the embryonic beginnings of that park, and I came in as head of parks to sort of finish up the second half of building it, and it is a big accomplishment. But in addition, and by the way, it's a spectacular park that fully leverages technology to help aid the storytelling. But I think the most important
We
thing...
should all go there?
You should all go there. Really, you really should. But the most important part of that is the guest experience. Because if you think about it, our attractions and our hotels are nothing but a stage for our cast members to make magic. And so now think of this challenge. You're in China and you're trying to find 10,000 cast members who've never been to a Disney park, They've never been to an amusement park. They've never been to a carnival, sort of going down, the road there. And you're trying to take this intangible feeling, this relationship that we have, and we take it for granted between our guests and our cast here, and now create it in a place that's very, very foreign. And they don't even know the difference between Snow White, Cinderella, or Aladdin. There's no awareness whatsoever because it's been closed. And so now you have to enable them to create their own version of that magic, but at the same time, make sure that the brand is consistent. So our fantastic HR people went ahead and hired within like 6 weeks, 10,000 cast members, and we weren't sure how it was all going to go. And Disney training is Disney training, but you're in a foreign world, and they created something different. When I walked into the park for the first sort of test day, they all put on the Mickey gloves, the finger and Mickey gloves like this, and they all lined up as we walked in. They created a Disney wave that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, but they took sort of their version of what they understood Disney magic to be from our training and creating something. I don't know who organized it or how it happened, but this kind of thing happens at Disney. This like serendipity happens where they take the core of what it is that we represent. I always like to throw out the term strategically consistent, tactically divergent, and that we want all of our parks to be strategically consistent, or all of our businesses, but then how they kind of create that in their own culture should really be, a function of what works there. And so today, if you walk in every day, they're sitting there with their gloves on, doing the Mickey wave, and it's very inspirational.
Thank you. It's a unique opportunity that Disney has. So do we have some questions from the audience? Yes.
We've got some microphones. Is this on? Yes. Thank you for being here. Boston College is a member of the Atlantic Coast Conference. The Atlantic Coast Conference, in connection with ESPN, has created a broadcast network called the ACC Network. Comcast is the largest provider of cable services to the Northeast. Comcast does not have an agreement with the ACC Network or with ESPN to broadcast within New England or anywhere the ACC Network. We are deprived from watching our hot football team, our national champion women's lacrosse program, our basketball teams. We can't see them in New England. You've thrown $27 billion on the NFL owners. Could you throw some crumbs at the Robertses so we can watch our Eagles on TV?
It sounds like it's NBC and Comcast that you have to go after.
We have good relationships with our Comcast partners as well. Brian Roberts I talk to frequently, and I'll make sure that's on our agenda for the future. But we don't attempt in any way to constrain viewership. Obviously, we want to amplify viewership. So to the extent that we can get that done, I'd love to do that.
Brian's so easy to deal with. Yes.
I'm just curious to follow up on the conversation about the metaverse, and if you could talk about how you think about, what does Disney want its competency to be? What do you want to be able to build and do yourself versus how you think about external technologies and things coming out of the startup world?
It's a great question. Somebody actually in the little preamble to this luncheon asked me that as well. I think to the extent that there are companies out there that are insurgents in their business and innovators, we'd love to work with them to partner to figure out how we bring our service to our fans quicker and easier, faster. But at the same time, we will not cut deals that will constrain our ability to deliver on our visions. Because so often people will say, we'll do a deal with you, we'll work with you, but that means you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this and this for the next 7 years. And that's where we pop out and we'll say no. Because we've got, between our R&D group, our Imagineering group, between our media technology group, we have some pretty great thinkers as well That doesn't mean that we can't partner with certain folks, and we're looking at that right now in terms of enabling technologies, but not constraining technologies.
Yes.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I want to see if you could comment on the business imperative. Your movie Eternals really embraced inclusion, diversity. Could you share some of the thinking around that? What can we expect in the future?
Well, we take inclusion and diversity really seriously in the company, and our belief is, anybody can write a check, but what we want to do is more than that. We believe that through our storytelling is the best way to open up people's eyes to an inclusive world and make sure that both behind the camera and in front of the camera, we're reflecting the world as it is and that the world as it should be. And so our obligation to create stories that are inclusive and share the possibilities of the future is very, very important, and Eternals certainly does that in several different ways. There's a commercial cost, frankly, to doing that in some cases, because we've not exactly had success in getting that film necessarily all over the world because of some of the values that are depicted in the film. And so we know that there's sometimes a cost to doing that. But if it's the right thing to do, and that's the inspiration of our directors and filmmakers and creatives that make that those stories, then we certainly have to be honest to that. And to the extent possible, balance the commercial considerations with the sort of the pro-social considerations. But that is a great example of a long history and series of making decisions to make our stories more inclusive.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Martha Sheridan. Excuse me. I'm CEO of the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Boston is only now starting to recover from the detrimental effects of the pandemic on the tourism side. And our meeting segment is really hurting still and just starting to emerge. I know that's a big component of the Disney product. What are your thoughts, or how is Disney doing in recovering the in-person meeting sector, and what are your thoughts on the future of in-person meetings at your resorts?
Yeah, the convention business is starting to come back. It is the last piece that will come back, though, I think, of all of them, because, I can't lie, every time I come to a gathering like this, even though there's pent-up demand and everyone wants to get together again, you're kind of looking around and feeling a little bit squirmish about it, and I'm sure that our client base that has come to us for decades and used our properties for convention is thinking the same thing. But I can say the same thing I said about the general consumer, is that I think there's a certain sense of confidence that people have that if you're going to come back someplace, I'm sure, Boston's the same way, but our Disney parks are a pretty good place to go and know that you're going to be handled responsibly. And our cast members have done an unbelievable job of doing that, even post-NBA bubble. And we've taken a lot of the learnings we learned from gathering of people, and we're extending it now. But the convention business is starting to pop back, so it's all about that brand again. It's about the trust.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jerry Denterline. With a complex company such as yours, with so many verticals, I bet brand strategy gets complicated, huh? I wonder, though, if you could describe what attributes tie all the Disney companies together, all the sub-brands together.
You're right. It's such a diverse company between sports and cruise lines. Each of these are separate industries. Like, they could be their own, Fortune 500 business. Hotels, restaurants. We've got, I think, almost 50 hotels just in Orlando alone. So we're a pretty big player in that. Obviously the TV business, the movie business. The word that we use that ties everything together is magic. And I know it's kind of an intangible word. What is that? But there's a spirit inside the Walt Disney Company, and it certainly gets practiced a little different at ABC News, let's say, than it does ESPN, than it does on a cruise ship. But there's a certain camaraderie. I had an executive who joined us with the Fox acquisition who asked me what does it take to be successful at the Walt Disney Company? Like, how would you like put it in a pill so that I get it and, take it in and then, make sure that I fit culturally? And I said, the sum total is bigger than the pieces. We all have a North Star, which is to please our ultimate customer. That is the most important thing that we do, whether it's a theme park goer, a cruise ship goer, a sports viewer, somebody who watches, World News Tonight religiously. We have a contract with them. And as long as you put the whole above the pieces, we talked a little bit about this yesterday at the game, as long as the concept of team and the bigger whole of it is greater than your piece, you'll be fine. But the moment it's like, well, it's my business, and I'm going to kind of guard things for, the betterment of my business at the expense of the whole, that is a quick way to, find yourself on the outside of the Walt Disney Company. So it's really about, it's a consumer orientation. I mean, I know it sounds simple, it's this basic magic consumer orientation, whatever you want to call it, but that is the essence of what our DNA is. And that's got to, be preeminent amongst everything.
You want to compete with companies that don't have that team first
Yes, we do.
concept where they think individual managers. It's been a common theme. Well, I think we all want to thank Bob for coming from the West Coast, realizing how important Beantown is. Thank you.
Thank you.